Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, today we've got a special guest who needs no introduction. That's the legendary David Icke. So welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Let's dive in deep straight off the bat. And I know we want to talk about the human body and how this all ties into the reality and the perception war on our consciousness. So just before we started recording, you were talking about Elon and all these elites seeing the human body as a biological computer that can now be programmed with these new, mRNA products, for example. The rabbit hole has taken me to a place where I really believe that our central nervous system, the pineal gland, those piezoelectric crystals that people talk about, this is all putting these pieces together of what you've spoken about, how the brain is a receiver, an antenna to
Yeah.
tap into the consciousness field, and then our five senses limit or filter our perception because without it, it'd be all too much. The other thing that's interesting is as they're pushing towards transhumanism and computers being ones and zeros, I find it fascinating that our DNA is like a computer code. And again, with this satanic inversion mimicry that they love to do, our ones and zeros are the mimic of the DNA and that type of thing. So, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Oh dear, that it's a massive picture, but can be quite simply explained. The reason I mentioned Elon Musk before we started is because there's a story running around the internet today I saw where he's talking about healthcare from here on, treating the body as a software program. And basically manipulating code to manipulate what's bravely called health. But of course, that's not what it's all about. I've been calling the human body a biological computer since the 1990s. And the more the evidence compounds upon evidence, the more blatantly that becomes confirmed. And also, the more, and Musk today is an example, the more these gophers for this global cult, as I call it, are openly talking about the fact that the body is a software program. Now, this was very clear too during COVID, where the Moderna people were talking in their various reports about the body being like a software program. And you know, if you look at reality, well, our level of reality anyway, not infinite reality, but our level of reality, uh, it's a simulation. It's basically based on code, and that's what the body is based on. Code. We call it the genetic code, and the code of the body is designed, encoded to interact with the code of the simulation, and it's exactly the same principle. And one of the things that's become so clear as the technological explosion has happened in recent decades, it's that the technological development, advancement happening before our eyes, I'm talking computerization, AI, digital stuff, etc., is mimicking, mirroring the way that we interact with our reality. And so if I am looking now at a computer and I'm seeing moving pictures, seeing background there. Uh, but if this room had Wi-Fi, um, the information that I'm now seeing in a totally different form, a decoded form, decoded by the computer, that information in the Wi-Fi field will be in a very different form. So the computer is the the decoder of Wi-Fi radiation information encoded in frequency, and it decodes that to a completely different picture, which I'm now looking at. And that's what the body is doing. We are interacting with what you might call the matrix, the simulation. And we are interacting with it through the five senses. The five senses are picking up and interacting with frequency information, the frequency field of the information field of the matrix. And all the five senses basically work the same, but the ears are a classic example. You're picking up frequency information. That's what the five senses do. And they then change that into electrical information, which they send to the brain. And the brain then decodes that information into digital holographic information, which is what we perceive as the world we're living in. When I would strongly suggest that the world we are living in is actually in here in a decoded form. And it's again the same principle as a computer, because the decoding in the computer of the Wi-Fi field to a completely different form on the screen is done inside the computer. We're just observing the screen, but it's all going on inside the computer. And so the more, as you indicate in the intro there, we realize that what we call biological is actually technological. The closer we get to understanding the very reality that we're experiencing, and we're not supposed to understand it. We're supposed to experience it as we think we're experiencing it and not understand its true nature, because then we're easily controllable by those that do understand its true nature. And so you have this situation where we are interacting with this matrix, with this information field, this simulation. And when I first started talking about this simulated reality, which was just after the turn of the millennium, there were very, very few people around who were talking about it. There was a guy, a member called Nick Bostrom, a professor then at Oxford University, who was talking about, this reality could be a simulation. But once you get into 2016, 2017, and onwards to present moment, the more mainstream scientists are coming out and saying, well, it actually does look like it's a simulation. The point being that for the simulation is not a construct. It's not a physical construct. It's a field of information, fields of information. And therefore, just like with a computer and Wi-Fi, you need a computer software program to decode the matrix, which is what this is. And, we go along with the fact, understandably, that anything biological is natural and anything technological is human-made. Okay, but how do we know the biological is natural? We can only know that by having something that is unimpeachably, unquestionably natural to compare it with, and we don't have that. And these people, as we're seeing more and more, do not treat the biological as natural. They treat it as a software program, and thus they can manipulate it. And the point that I've been making for a while, well, quite a while now, is that, if you look at the human body, it's clearly operating like a computer system, like a form of AI, if you like. Because I would say to people, when's the last time you remember breathing? Well, it was the last time you were out of breath and it became conscious. Otherwise, you just breathe. And the body is tinkering and tweaking all the time in response to environmental stimulus. So you go into a hot room like this one now. We're having a heat wave, ladies and gentlemen. It must be global warming. We are. It tweaks to respond to the heat. If I go into a cold place, it responds in another way. Yeah. It's constantly at work without the conscious mind being aware of any of it. But what I'm also saying, and this is absolutely crucial, is that running through this human body biological computer software system are psychological programs. Yeah. And, before I started getting banned from loads of countries, I traveled the world constantly, vastly, many, endless bloody countries, really. And what I found and observed was that no matter what the nature of the culture, the nature of the people, the nature of the religion, the dominant religion, whatever, people in particular circumstances, like daily circumstances, they tended to respond the same no matter where they were. And then you start looking at the what scientists call the reptilian brain, or the R complex at the back of the brain here. That's where we get fight or flight from. And that's a psychological reaction to danger. Do I run or do I freeze? And you get things like road rage are responses of the reptilian brain, which doesn't think, it reacts. And when you react through the reptilian brain, a psychological part of the computer program, then other parts of the brain kick in, and you go, what was I doing? What was I thinking of? Why did I do that? Well, you did that because you weren't thinking, you were reacting. And that's what because the reptilian brain is about the survival mechanism, not just the survival of your life physically, but it's survival of your relationship, your job, your paying the rent at the end of the month. Yeah. And so that's a massive key manipulator and trigger for so much human response. And what I'm saying, and I'll finish with this, or I could talk forever. What I've been saying is that we have to understand I would suggest, the difference between the biological computer program with all its psychological parts of it, with consciousness, which is the eternal, true, infinite I level of us. And what we do, God, I'm just knocked my coffee over. What we do is we mistake the body level of reaction and response with consciousness. In other words, we mistake the experience with who we really are. And that's crucial, because the idea is to disconnect that expanded level of awareness from an impact and an influence on the body-mind level, if you like. And therefore, the body-computer level dominates human perception, thus human behavior, and human awareness of reality. And that process of moving from a body-centric perception of everything to expand into your true self-awareness, that's what we call awakening. Yeah. And more people are going through that, of course, now. But it has to move a long way yet.
Do you need to clean that coffee up, mate, or you're all right to keep going?
It's all right, we'll keep going.
Cool. Well, I completely agree with you that I think the ancients knew a lot of this as well. When we look into certain, like the numerology, like 33, that's been, inverted into this evil Freemasonry secret society thing, and there's the 33, parts of the spine, and then 666, which is carbon and all living things, and that's been inverted into something evil. So there's this war on this knowledge that the ancients knew, as you say, that the consciousness is like the electricity. I've been going down the rabbit hole about plasma recently and all this type of thing. What is it that animates us? Then we have to look after our hardware, our physical body. And then, as you say, that programming, we are just such programmable beings with that software. And we just believe whatever we get shown. And this gets into like the education system and everything, right? But one thing.
Exactly. And Musk was talking in his comments on healthcare, where it was going. He was talking that the body is programmable. So, yes, it is. It is programmable. Now, imagine that you know that, but your target population doesn't.
Exactly.
I mean, what a position of power that gives you immediately.
Yeah, and in terms of expanding our perception, again, I think the ancients knew a lot more about like the meditation, the astral state. Some of these declassified documents are openly talking about the holographic universe and astral projection, remote viewing, all these types of things.
Yeah.
I know you had an ayahuasca experience, and I've had several of those journeys, and all these things that can change our state of consciousness and awareness. So, what was that like for you, as someone that maybe had delved into these things, actually seeing that and having that extra perception firsthand? How did you find that experience?
Well, I was writing a book in 2021, 2021, 22. About 9/11 and how it was all a set up job, and the official stories are nonsense. And I said to people then, if I'm going to take this further, deeper in the rabbit hole, I've got to experience reality, not in a dream. Was it real? Was it not real? But in a conscious state. And just after that, I got this invite out of nowhere to go to a Brazilian rainforest near a place called Manaus, and take part in ceremonies, ayahuasca ceremonies, right? Now, I could have taken this stuff 4 times, took it twice. That was enough for me. The first night, some kind of extraordinary things happened. Like we're in this round hut, and I was doing it on my own. There were lots of people there, but not that night. I was doing it on my own because I'd missed the first one for various reasons. And I'm lying there in this ayahuasca state, and I felt like an energy coming out of the center of my chest, and all the way. It was like an arc. I perceived it as an arc, and going into my head as I was, lying on the ground. And suddenly there was music playing. The guy who was just overseeing it, he was playing music. And suddenly the music stopped, or a kind of stuttered. Obviously, something to do with the electricity was affecting it. And so this went on for a bit. And then what this it's a big round hut. What it had was strip lights going all the way around the roof, but all the strip lights were off while I did this ayahuasca. And suddenly one of these strip lights came on, and I'm lying there. I'm thinking, what's the guy put the bloody light on for? Now, what I realized later is you couldn't do that. You pressed a switch and they all came on. You just pressed it, they all went off. But this strip light came on. Then another one came on next to it, and then a third, while all this is happening to me. And so the next night, I took a stronger dose, shall we say. And for 5 hours, this took a female form, this female voice, as loud as mine is now, talked to me about the nature of reality and how it was all an illusion, in great detail. And I afterwards I had recall of pretty much all of it, and it was quite a an extraordinary realization that what people take as reality, physical reality, solid reality, is actually nothing like we think we're experiencing.
Yeah.
And I remember a guy called Max Tegmark, who was at the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he wrote a book called Our Mathematical Universe, in which he was pointing out that, and I would say at one level, there are multiple levels. On one level, it's all mathematics, and absolutely, I would agree with that. But he was making the point that if you were a player, like a non-player character or whatever, or a player in a within the virtual reality game, not playing it like this, but within it, you might perceive what was going on around you as real. You might think in terms of space and time and all these things that we experience reality as and with. But if you went deeper into the reality that you were experiencing in the game, you went deeper and deeper into it, and you magnify it, you realize it was just pixels. What you thought was real was just pixels.
Yeah.
And it's something like that is the difference between the way we experience reality and what reality is in reality.
Yeah.
And like I say, you have two worlds within one world. The world of this global cult, which is a network of secret societies, a global network of secret societies, fiercely compartmentalized. So most people in it don't know the big picture. The great majority of the people in it don't know the big picture, only know some of it. And that cult level of initiation and degrees of knowledge that it's broken out and structured as, broken up as and structured as, that passes on only to the chosen few this advanced knowledge of what reality is and how it works. And the same, if you do the research, the same cultists, the major cultists, also created the sources of information that the target population get: education system, media, so on and so forth, Silicon Valley. And therefore, there's two worlds, and the difference between them is knowledge.
Yes.
They pass on highly advanced knowledge about the nature of reality, how it works, what the game is, where the human race is being taken. And they want to keep the target population in ignorance to the point where it only knows enough to serve this, but doesn't know enough to suss this. We're starting to make progress on that now, like never before. I remember what it was like when I started out. My goodness me, no one wanted to know. But it's this division of knowledge, because what your ideal is, you pass on advanced knowledge through the cult, and you keep your target population in ignorance of that knowledge. And one of the real powerful, crucial levels of perceptual manipulation is to squeeze the sense of the possible. You know, there was that great quote from that German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, who talked about every man. It's not every man, but it is vast numbers. Every man takes the limits of his own, basically takes the limits of reality as the limits of his field of vision. And so you squeeze the sense of the possible among the population, so that when people do come along and they uncover what they know and pass it on, the reaction from the population is that's nonsense. That's not possible. That's ridiculous. They could never do that. But they're doing it all the time, and the suppression of knowledge is the crucial foundation of it. And I'll tell you one of the key way that they do it, because what they have to do for the few, and it is the few, to control billions, with 8 billion we're told now, is mathematically that's not possible. You can't have a handful of people comparatively controlling 8 billion people. So how do they do it? Well, you look at your target population in totality, and you think, well, if they unite with the realization that we've got all of them in our gun sights as our targets, then if they unite in response, we're done. So what we've got to do is we've got to break them up into belief systems. Belief systems, not that, okay, the point in my research, this is how I see it. That's fair enough. As long as, in the light of new information, I'm going to move and go with it. And maybe I'll advance my knowledge as a result. You don't want that. That's the last thing you want. Because what happens then, as you will know, is you start going in to these hidden levels of awareness that when you go there, you go, oh, so I get it now. Yeah. You don't want that. So what you do is you want people to have belief systems that are rigid and unquestioning. Now, religion is a classic, absolute classic. But what we call religion is actually a mentality which also involves orthodox mainstream science, which is supposed to be anti-religion, but actually it's the same mentality. It's the same mentality that you see with political ideologies.
Yeah.
This is how it is, and I'm not moving from it. Someone else, this is how it is, I'm not moving from it. And so you have, say, a religious belief system, and that has a story, often has its only books, but it has a story. And if you want to be whatever that religion calls itself, and I'm talking about all of them, not just one, then you must stay with the story. You can't deviate from the story, otherwise you're no longer a whatever you call yourself. And what that does is create war. Basically, it puts a prison cell over your mind, because you can't go into these hidden areas of awareness, knowledge. You can't explore them because you're told that's blasphemy, or you are dabbling in the occult, a word that just means hidden. And it's in this hidden knowledge that reality dawns. So you mustn't go beyond the walls. Now, you can have the walls of the Islamic religion, you can have the walls of the Christian religion, the walls of the Judaic religion, the walls of the Hindu religion. It doesn't matter. They're still walls, and they're still here and no further.
Yeah.
Don't go in the hidden. And then you look at mainstream orthodox science. It's just the same. You have the scientific orthodoxy. Its holy books are the books of scientific orthodoxy. And if you go beyond the orthodoxy, you are a pseudoscientist, or you are dabbling in the paranormal. Bit strange, Bill, what's it doing? And that's also ensuring that you don't go into the hidden. You don't go into these areas where you can discover the vast totality of everything. So whether it's mainstream orthodox science, or whether it's a religion, or whether it's a political ideology, they all have the same effect. Now, once you've got people in those belief systems and you've grouped them together, then you can play them off against each other to divide and rule, which is the absolute essential bottom line of the few controlling the many. And so you've got different belief systems all over the world, often because they think that they must have it, therefore anyone who says something differently must be wrong.
Yeah.
They seek to impose their beliefs on other people. This is where wars break out and what have you. And instead of saying, well, I don't see it like that, but I respect your right to see it like that, as long as you don't seek to impose what you believe on me, and then we'll get on.
Yeah.
But it's this seeking to impose your rigid belief systems on others, like, oh, my religion must take over the world or whatever, that is the core of the problem. Because what's happening then is the target population is completely divided and separated and at war with itself, while the string holders are laughing their guts off. And that's how it works. And, you know, in the end, a few can only control the many by controlling the perceptions and thus behavior of the many.
Yeah.
And if we just went back to a blank sheet of paper and said, look, never mind all that I've been told to believe all my life, I'm gonna let my perception of reality get on that blank sheet of paper only if the evidence supports it. I'm not doing it on faith. What is faith? It's belief without evidence.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to now create my own way of seeing the world based on my own research and my own intuition and my own feelings, and not have it downloaded to me en masse from the education system, the media, whatever, and all the other things there are.
Yeah, I think that's no more obvious than right now, right? Where they're playing these religious off against each other for World War III in the Middle East and everything happening with Israel and that. But one question I do have for you is, I think that all religions initially were telling similar messages, and that there's a lot of overlap with the gods between different cultures. But there's obviously been a concerted effort to change and manipulate some of these scriptures in the Bible. And I guess the other question I have for you is, why do you think there seems to be more of an attack on Christianity, and with, again, the Satanism and the inversion? Why are they obsessed with things like the upside down cross? And like, what is there any thoughts on why that particularly gets demonized more than others? Or
well, I do go into all this. There's 28 chapters in my latest book, The Roadmap, and about 5 of them are about religion in its various forms.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at ancient texts, like the Sumerian tablets, as they're called, from thousands of years ago, and many other ancient writings and accounts, and then you play them off against Old Testament accounts, particularly Old Testament accounts, and you realize that the God singular, as the Old Testament is translated, actually comes from a word meaning gods plural. And I do think that there is a manipulation that's taking place, that's gone from believing in multiple gods, which I say are of the non-human variety. I think they're still here and they're still manipulating, to one single God. I mean, Hinduism still has multiple gods, but I mean, religions like Christianity and Islam, etc. I mean, people don't realize, who don't look at this in more than just a scan, is that so much of what Islam believes and the personalities it believes in are the same as the Christian religion and the Old Testament religion. Moses, Abraham. Abraham's a big figure in Islam. Mother Mary, Jesus, all these figures.
a lot of it based off astrotheology as well.
Yeah, and so you know, if you If you arrange, say, 100 people in a line, and you tell them a story, and the first one tells the second one the story, and the second one tells the third one. By the time you get to the 100, it's probably a different story, or there are bits missing from it. Whereas, we're supposed to just accept things from thousands of years ago as if they were written yesterday. Crazy. I mean, the whole thing with Israel and the whole idea of a chosen people and a chosen land and all that stuff for the chosen people, all that comes from the Old Testament. Well, I say to people, who wrote the Old Testament? Who wrote that said that today is still dominant in the upheavals of the Middle East that seem endless? Well, I don't know. But God wrote it. Oh, really? Well, why is God so contradictory between the Old Testament and the New Testament then? Why is God such a bloodthirsty tyrant in the Old Testament? Why? What's going on? But this is the thing. You put the Old Testament with the New Testament in the Bible, and therefore, if you then believe, whether you're into Judaism or whether you're into Christianity, if you believe that's the word of God, then you've got to square all the circles and all the contradictions, because God's never wrong, even though there's blatant contradictions in the Bible. And so what you do is you get Christians supporting the Old Testament and of course Jews and people that follow Judaism are very much into the Old Testament, and so you take it as a whole, when what perception does, or should be doing, I would suggest, is taking what feels right and leaving the rest, in the realization that it was written thousands of years ago, and who says, well, who wrote it for a start, but who says it's right? I mean, there are certain things, moral things, like do unto others as you would do unto to others as you would do unto yourself, etc. But I mean, there's so much mass slaughter. God demands it. I mean, can we just take a breath here, anybody, and just explain that? Because it makes no sense for a loving God to demand frickin' slaughter.
Well, then I guess,
and what you're having is people like Netanyahu are justifying their modern slaughter because of what's in the Old Testament. He quotes from it in justifying stuff that he does. So it's like, just stop, take a breath, look at it again, dispassionately, not from belief systems, but just dispassionately. And it looks very different. And this is the other thing, about religion, mate. Look at where Christians, Muslims, Jews, followers of Judaism, and Hindus, etc., come from. They come either from those parts of the world where that religion is dominant. So basically, from birth, they've been brought up in that religion, belief. Give me the child to the age of 7, I'll show you the man. Or they've been brought up in families in other parts of the world where that religion is dominant. And now, if people were looking dispassionately at the evidence and saying, well, this makes more sense to me than that wouldn't happen. You wouldn't have the overwhelming majority of people that follow a religion brought up in that religion. They would have freedom of thought to decide where they wanted to go, but it's programming. And if there's a few of you and you want to control the many, you've got to turn the many into programmers of the other many. And you know what was kind of interesting? Well, I did enormous research from about 1996 to around 2003, 2004 into mind control techniques and MK Ultra. I met loads and loads of people who were involved in MK Ultra. And one of the things that they were programmed to do was program other people. So they programmed the programmers to program others. It was, and I looked at that and I thought, well, my God, that's what's happening all over the world. They've got the program to program the next generation. And of course, you've got the media and education, which is all adding to it. And basically, if all that you've ever heard is basically one version of events, then there's a very good chance you'll believe it. And you know, you come out of the womb, and for the first 3-4 years, you're subject to the influence of your parents primarily, and your parents have been through the system you're about to go through, and most of them buy it, not all of them, but most of them have bought it, and they're not passing it on to you out of malevolence. They're passing it on to you because they've been programmed to believe it's the right thing. You then go to school, and now you've got teachers representing the state and the state version of reality, passing on to you, first of all, authority, so you can get used to it, when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can eat, when you can talk, when you can go home, when you have to be there, and also giving you a version of reality, the world, increasingly through school, that's approved by the state. It's called the state curriculum. You then go off to university or college maybe, and then you go out into the world of work. And there you meet all the people that have been through what you've just been through, but earlier. And there's an agreement on reality, because that's what everyone's been told reality is. And therefore, there is this collective agreement on what's normal. And what is normal? Normal is only what you normally experience. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's true. It just means what you normally experience. And given we've all been through that same system, well, funny enough, we have a kind of sense of normal. So someone over here comes out and says things about, you know, manipulation of the world and reality is not what you think it is. And the reaction is, well, that's not normal. That's crazy, man. Again, squeezing the sense of the possible. And so it goes on. But the great news is, it could be greater, there could be more. But the great news is, you know, when I started out in 1990, consciously on this journey, still going on, virtually no one wanted to know. I mean, some of the stuff I was saying, you're mad, mate. Literally, you're mad. You're insane. It's not like that now. Of course, still with great numbers of people, but the numbers now who are, even within, you know, the institutions of science, some of them, the way they are able to say, well, not immediately dismiss things that are different. That's very encouraging. But we you know, we are in a to say a race against time. That's another illusion, time. But we are in a race to get enough people awake before this.
Absolutely.
This lid comes down, called AI human fusion.
Absolutely. Well, just on a bit of a side tangent, David, we've spoken about then, you know, thousands of years old tablets and stuff. I know you said you've started to go down the Tartaria rabbit hole. So for me, it's kind of like, how do we really, really know things that are thousands of years old, and is time even linear? What are your thoughts on resets? And, you know, obviously Rockefellers and Rothschilds rewriting history and the Schofield Bible and stuff. So what are all your thoughts on maybe Tartarian resets and that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, what we always got to do is realize that we are dealing with a reality that's based on information and plays out in the form of coding, which is a form of information. And therefore, if we were living in a world that was literally solid, literally physical, it ain't. More and more scientists are having to face that fact. Then so much would not be possible that actually is. So, if you are encoding a reality for humans to decode into a sense of reality, then you can change the reality. And you can then have your target population decode your changed reality. And so anything suddenly becomes possible on the basic principle of click, click, enter. You can change things. You can infuse information that was not there. You can infuse finds of ancient information that wasn't actually there. I mean, and all the time we are pursuing and down the rabbit hole, that always has to be there. Well, but they could do anything they like. So the point you raise, I think, is very, very valid. And whether a lot of this ancient information, whether that's been encoded into the matrix, or whether it's something that happened in the sense of people left them, that also has to be held in your mind as a possibility. In terms of Tartaria, yeah, I've read a lot about that in recent times, and you've only got to go into these fantastic cathedrals. I mean, we've got a lot in England, obviously, because it's an old civilization. And you look up, you see the scale of some of these buildings. The scale, the height is unbelievable. And you go, but they were in horse and carts at the time. They didn't have technology at the time, at least the technology in the way that history is given to us. And there's a lot more to know about that as well. So how did they build them? And another thing that I've come across over the years is the way that this matrix, it operates. Well, first of all, there's multiple timelines. I think the Mandela effect might have something to do with that. But there are sequences. It runs in sequences, and then after a particular point, it resets, and it's basically, I guess you could relate it to rebooting a computer, where you just reset. And it basically starts again, or starts in a different way again. And it may well be that some of the buildings from one reset kind of bleed over into the new reset.
Yeah.
Because you look at ancient buildings, pyramids and temples and phenomenal structures, and we struggle to build them today. How did the ancients do it? And this is the point that where I think blatantly the anthropologists go massively wrong. This idea that human evolution only goes forward and upwards. No, it doesn't. Why does it go forward and upwards? What makes that possible? Knowledge. Knowledge. Okay. So what if knowledge in these different resets expanded and then dropped? Expanded and then dropped. What you'd be experiencing is the knowledge to create phenomenal structures, and then other periods after that where you have a dearth of knowledge, and therefore what is perceived and indeed experienced as some kind of primitive society. And the idea is, you're going up and down as knowledge goes up and down, as it's put in and it's withdrawn. And anyone, whether you've been there, but anyone who has been to the Giza pyramids should know what I mean, because the Giza pyramids are always shot from the same angle, looking outwards into the desert. And people get the impression that those pyramids are in some desert area. No, just turn around and what do you see? Coming right up behind you, right up to close to the pyramids on one side, is the gigantic sprawl of crazy Cairo.
Yeah.
And if anyone looks at the pyramid, says, yeah, that was ancient. That was supposed to have been done thousands of years ago. Yeah, okay. And of course, human evolution only goes forward and upwards, right? Oh, yeah. Excuse me, what's that? I mean, the idea that knowledge cannot go up and down, and therefore possibility can't go up and down, needs you only just stand next to the pyramids and look in another direction. And you'll see that is blatantly obvious that happens. And so I think these resets are a form of reset of this matrix, a reset of this program, and that knowledge is infused and knowledge is withdrawn. And when I see people who research the whole Tartaria subject talking about resets from a different point of view than I am, but talk about resets. And then I see Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, as he was, talking about the Great Reset during COVID. I think that we have to be very, very fluid in the way we see reality and the way we see the possibility of changing reality in ways that a solidified physical world would not be able to do. But that's not what we're in. So they are able to do that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite rabbit holes. And recently I've been researching a lot of this ancient Egyptian stuff that might have been throughout the America. And there's pyramids all over the world. And even some Australian archaeologists who've had it on the show have found Egyptian hieroglyphs throughout Australia. And I think you can easily argue that we're de-evolving now with the fluoride and the pesticides, and humans have never been sicker than we have now, and probably dumber than we have now in terms of being kept in the dark. So I completely agree with what you said there. But changing gears a little bit, I want to get into the alien, demonic, reptilian, different cultures call them jinn, Nephilim, fallen angels, whatever. But what are your thoughts on this phenomenon? Because I know you've spoken about them being interdimensional, but then we've probably both spoken to guests that have said, no, I've seen them in the physical, in deep underground military bases. I've spoken to victims that have seen during the worst of the ceremonies they do, the blood drinking and stuff. They've described demonic face changes, whereas others have said, no, it's a reptilian sort of shift. So do you think it can be a spectrum of all of these things? Like, how
definitely. Yeah. I think one of the big problems is when people look for one answer to everything. There's multiple levels, and there's multiple ways of seeing things, and there's multiple ways of explaining things. For example, when I talk about interdimensional entities, I'm talking about the focus of control being in another dimension. What I'm not saying is that non-human entities don't exist in our reality, not least because they can change the frequency and come into our reality and then go out again. And that's another thing, you know, with the it's not normal, is if you can keep from the population of vast numbers of it how reality works, then you can get them to dismiss things that can easily be explained. For instance, we only see a tiny band of frequency called visible light by scientists. Everything outside of that, we can't see. Some psychics can go further into the field, but in the everyday experience, you can only see a narrow band of frequency. Yeah. And people think almost instinctively that when they look into the reality, like this room, then they can see everything in the space they're looking at. But they can't. They can only see what exists within this tiny band of frequency. So I'm looking at a couple of lights. I'm looking at a wall, a door, a desk, computer, and those forms operate within visible light. They reflect visible light. Actually, they reflect light. So I can see them. We can see them. But everything between these forms within visible light is, to me and to everybody, empty space. There's nothing there. But it's not empty. Infinity is in this room. It's just that this biological computer I talked about before is only decoding a tiny band of visible acuity. And therefore, when something enters visible light, it will appear to the observer to come out of nowhere. And when it leaves visible light, it will appear to the observer to have disappeared into nowhere. It hasn't. It's entered the frequency that you can decode, and it's left the frequency you can decode. But because of the sense of normal and the fact that we don't know that, well, most people don't know that. When people say, honestly, mate, this UFO, it appeared out of nowhere and then it disappeared into nowhere, just like, what are you on? Yeah. You know, because it's not explainable, but it's very simply explainable. So for me, there are different levels of this, all of which have validity in and of themselves. But if you take just one and say, well, that's it, that's the explanation. No, there's multiple explanations for the same thing. So you've got this other dimensional level, which I say is controlling human society and created this matrix. And this global cult is serving the interests of that other dimensional force. That force, or representatives of that force, can enter visible light. So there's your quote alien UFO and experience that people have. There's also, I strongly suggest, non-human entities within the Earth, which have to be taken into consideration. And then I think, and I came across this in the 1990s, there's also what we would perceive as UFOs that are flown by humans. Because the thing about the cutting edge of human technological potential, we look at what's happening in the public eye, and we say, well, that's the cutting edge then. No, it's miles back from the cutting edge. The cutting edge is in the underground bases and the secret projects that no one ever sees, that's not allowed to see them. And if you go deep enough in these underground bases, I've been given chapter and verse by this way back in the 90s by people who've been in those bases. If you go deep into these underground bases, there comes, and they're, some of them are incredibly deep. You reach those levels where there's an interaction between the human and the non-human.
Yeah.
I've talked to many people. I'm sure you have too.
I've heard the same, and Pine Gap in Australia might be one of the
Yeah.
deepest. Yeah.
Classic. And so a lot of the technological transfer is done from non-human to human in these underground bases. And this is an interesting point I've observed about this flow of advanced technological knowledge that's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. You can hardly keep up with it. There's not a point anymore where people are sitting around a table waiting for the next level of control to be invented. It's flowing out in like a seamless flow because it already exists. The idea is to bring it out into the public arena as fast as you can. Now it's kind of breakneck speed, without them realizing that it's all organized, orchestrated, all part of a grand plan. And to do that, you need front people who can represent the story of how this technology was created and developed, how this technology was created and developed. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people developing technology. What I'm saying is the real society-changing tech is already there, and it's being played out in a sequence. And your Elon Musks and your Peter Thiels and your Alex Karps and your all these people, your Sam Altmans, Larry Ellison, all these people who appear to be fronting up and developing this technology, Bill Gates, another one. They're cover stories. That's why so many of them aren't very bloody bright.
Yeah.
Have you heard Elon Musk do an interview? I mean, it's like the man's a bloody genius. Are you having a laugh? But they're front men, and they have images and what have you. But behind them, this technology is played out in a sequence, and that's why it's getting faster and faster and faster, because they're not waiting for it to be developed. It's already developed. And we have to be played into believing it's all kind of happening organically, because if we realize what was really happening, then we'd suss a hell of a lot more beyond that about what's really happening all around us.
Yeah, you said something then that it's all orchestrated, the tech they're drip feeding. It's just like everything, the major world-changing events are all orchestrated. It's this problem-reacted solution, all these things that you talk about, right? But I want to get back into like the royals and the bloodlines, and you and Fritz Springmeier have done so much great work about why they're so obsessed with like inbreeding, and they're so good at changing their surnames or renaming a family, but they're always looking to intermarry within that cult. And now it's getting to the point of ridiculous with Katy Perry going out with Justin Trudeau and this type of stuff, which makes no sense. So why do you think they're so obsessed? Do you think they are a different genetic, like the Homo capensis with the longer heads in ancient times and the Rothschilds? Do you think this allows them to be possessed or contact these rituals the other side more easily, or what do you think it is about this bloodline they care so much about?
Yeah, well, I've been writing about this since the 1990s. They are hybrids. They have two fields, because everything, I mean, to break it all down, everything is about fields of information, which we then decode through the senses and the brain into a form that we think we're experiencing, which seems to be a solid human world as we experience it. So that's the key, is to keep holding that thought that everything is a decoded information field. And suddenly things that would be otherwise impossible start to be explainable. So if you are a human field, I'm looking at you and I'm going to decode a human field into holographic, actually is what it is, holographic reality. And you're going to look like a flesh and blood physical human. These bloodlines have dual information fields. They have a human information field and they have their non-human information field. And I would emphasize, the reptilian side of it seems to be quite dominant, but there's multiple types. There's the big, tall Nordic people that are very human-like in the way they look. And there's the greys. There's all different types, but the reptilian does seem to be a major aspect of this. So you've got two fields. Now, the field that they are putting to the world is the human field for obvious reasons. So you're looking at the human field and they look human because that's what you're decoding. And then sometimes, never in public or unless there's a problem, there's an accident, a mistake, but massively in rituals, it's been described to me endlessly, this, by people who've experienced the rituals. The non-human field becomes the dominant one. And as you are observing, decoding, you're decoding a human field, and suddenly it switches to the non-human field. And to you, someone has just transformed from a human into a non-human. And people say, I do understand it, that's not possible because you can't go from a solid body to another solid body. And you know something, you can't, but that's not what's happening. It's all happening in the decoding processes of the observer. And I first came across this in 1996, when I met 12 different people. I was traveling around America talking to nobody. I was in over 15 days. I was traveling around when this was happening. I met, and I was in a different city every day. I was younger then. And I met 12 different people who told me the same story of how they had seen apparently a human turn into a non-human. And I've heard so many stories all around the world of similar things. And of course, to the observer, that's exactly what happened. But what's actually happening is the switch taking place between the human and the non-human. There's a South African lady who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, we had her on the channel, Juliet Bryant, and you guys shared it on your website. Yeah.
Juliet Bryant, yeah, and she talks about seeing Epstein shift, and it's rare because they don't want you to see who they are, but sometimes it happens, and in rituals it happens all the time. And when you realize this background, a lot of things start to make sense that didn't. For instance, why is it that certain bloodlines called royals have a divine right to rule? First of all, what's divine mean? And secondly, what's this right to rule? What's going on? And so you are bewildered. Why should you rule and not them? But you realize what royalty is. It's this hybrid bloodline, and if you interbreed outside of the bloodline, then the whole thing gets diluted pretty quickly, I think it seems to be. So you interbreed with your own kind. And that's why you have royals who marry to produce the children, but have their fancy women everywhere else, because this has been chosen for them. I mean, Lady Diana, Diana Spencer, she was chosen for breeding purposes. I mean, she used to call herself the Windsor's broodmare, because she started to understand a lot of what was going on. I talked to a lady who knew her close friends for 9 years, and some of the things she told me, which I put in the books, are extraordinary in terms of this reptilian royal bloodline. And so you had this period. Unfortunately, you're in Australia and New Zealand, like we are in Britain. We're stuck with the bloody Windsors as head of state. It's ludicrous. Canada too, and the Commonwealth. But most former royal countries have dispensed with them, because there came a point where people no longer accepted who had sex with who in what order to decide who was their head of state. They didn't have that anymore. So there was this massive shift whereby they went from royal control to political control.
Yeah.
And these bloodlines, and it's not just royalty; it's what people call the aristocracy. They're all these hybrids, and that's why they call them aristocracy and royals, because they have a different genetics. What do they call them? Blue bloods.
Yeah.
And so there was a problem there, because they were losing our person is in charge by default to politics. And so they just moved these bloodlines out into politics, into government administration. The people are always there. Politicians come and go. Into corporations, into business, into big pharma, eventually into all these institutions. And they've gone on running the show ever since, while the public think, because they have a vote every 4 or 5 years, that they are somehow in control. But as I've shown in the books over the years, you have your left party and you have your right party in most countries, sometimes center parties too. But if you go, and they have their debate and they have their rhetoric and all that stuff. But if you look at societies, global society in general, but in countries, no matter who's in power, the same basic direction of travel continues. So they have to give you the illusion of choice. So you think you have some say in the government of your country.
Yeah.
When actually, if you go one step back in the shadows, the same hand is holding the strings attached to both parties. And so there was a great line I used to hear in America when I first went there to talk about this stuff in the 1990s. It doesn't matter who you vote for, the government still gets in.
Yeah.
And that's very true. And so there's a massive illusion that is perpetuated on us called politics, in which we are offered apparent choice between people controlled by the same force. And so in 2016, when Trump first came on the political scene in America, I started calling him out because you didn't have to do very much research into his background to realize he was controlled by Israel and Israeli networks. He then gets into power. And, I watched him. He came in running for president in 2020. No, sorry, 2016. And he was against the best part of 20 other people at the start looking for the Republican nomination. And he won it, even though they were laughing at him. Oh, yeah, Trump running for president. What a joke. He won it. And when he won it, I thought, this guy's the chosen one. He's going to get in. And he then beats Hillary Clinton and gets into power. And very quickly, his ownership by Israel became blatant. He was funded into office by Sheldon Adelson, an ultra Zionist casino magnate, to the tune of $100 million. And part of that deal was that in office, he would move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Big symbolic move, more than symbolic move. And that he would acknowledge Israeli ownership of the Golan Heights, which were Syrian territory. And he did both. And so when he's coming through to be to run this time in 2024, I was pointing out again, this guy is a gopher. He's a cult gopher, and he's not going to do. See, this is how it's possible to work it out. You know where the cult wants to take the world, right? And you know they control the political system. I mean, how do you run for president? You must attract cuckoo land amounts of money for a start. And so you look at where the cult wants to take the world, especially now where they're moving in on their end game of AI human fusion. And you say, well, if they want him in, and I was very confident they did again, then he ain't going to do what he's telling the MAGA he's going to do, is he? So I was pointing out, he ain't going to do what he's telling you, but he is going to do what he's not telling you. And he is going to do what he's telling you he won't do.
Yeah.
And the other thing I said that he would do was facilitate the AI human agenda by leaps and bounds, just as China has long done. And he's done both. And of course, he wasn't going to start wars, but he started wars. And the MAGA is now broken up, basically, just a rump left in terms of any belief that Trump is who he said he was. He never was. And the twin things that Trump was put in there to do, he's doing. Right. One, he's facilitating the AI tech oligarch agenda. 2 days into his presidency, the second time, he wheels out Larry Ellison and Sam Altman to announce this up to $500 billion data center operation called Stargate, right? So, and he's now worked to destroy any regulation of AI in America and all that stuff. Okay, but if you look at how this cult has moved forward human society, it's done it in stages, because you can't go from A to Z in one leap, because the change is too vast, and second, people might suss there's something going on. So you go in as as fast as you can, but not so fast that you alert too many. It's what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, which is now the totalitarian sprint. So it goes through a series of status quos. And each status quo is then destroyed so the next status quo can take its place. And you're moving towards your goal all the time. So if you start before the First World War, there was a certain status quo in the world. You then had the First World War. It destroyed it. You then had the Versailles Peace Conference, where the winners basically carved up the world. And then you went into and set the scene to bring Hitler to power to get into the Second World War. You went into the 1930s and you had the Great Depression that did for the old financial system. And then you were into World War II. And by the end of World War II, when they brought in the United Nations and the Bretton Woods Agreement and the IMF and the World Bank and all that stuff, the world was completely different to what it had been in 1913. And I was born in 1952, 7 years after the war. So pretty much through my life, there's been this post-war status quo. But like all status quos, if it doesn't move, then you're not going to replace it with something because it's in the way. So you have to, at each stage, destroy the status quo so the new stage can come in. And I have to laugh. I watch the MAGA and many of these so-called influencers that are most promoted in the alternative media in America, particularly. And they say, look, Trump, he's bringing down the world order. No, he's not. He's destroying the status quo. It's what he's been put in to do. Because as that falls, the new order can come in, much more extreme.
Yeah.
And so he's through the war in Iran, which has potentially fantastic consequences for the world economy if this goes on. And interestingly, I always say to people, if you want to know why something's happening, look at the outcome. Look at the outcome and it'll tell you why it's happening. So if you think that you have to bring down the old order and structure to bring in the new, well, what better way to do it than to dismantle the world economy by reducing the amount of energy on which the world economy depends is available? Because that's going to push prices up massively and people aren't going to be able to pay them. They're going to be going into destitution and they're going to be going into poverty. And if it continues, then even the supply is going to be drying up. So the war in Iran fits perfectly Trump's dismantling of the world economy.
Yeah.
And then you've got his tariffs and so much more that he's done that are dismantling the world economy. And so you have this guy, Mark Carney, this cult to his DNA, Mark Carney, former head of the Canadian Central Bank, the Bank of England, and endless other financial cult operations, who's now the Prime Minister of Canada. And he stands up and says, "Oh, it's the end of the old order. What Trump's doing? Yeah, absolutely, mate. And you bloody know it's meant to be, and that's why he's in there." And so what we're seeing is the old order being dismantled, so the new order can take its place. And Trump's playing an essential role in that. And they'll hang him out to dry eventually, just as they do with all these politicians who they just here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, you can see that playing out now, can't you? Once they use him as the chess piece to do what they want, they might release the Epstein files with him in it, and then they're going to say, we can't trust politicians, we're going to use AI. And this kind of goes full circle into what we've been talking about with these chapters. And, when the royals were no longer getting the energy off everyone, they changed to politics. But does this go all the way through to the pharaohs and then the Romans, and then I want to talk about your interview you did back in the day with, is it Credo Mutwa, or
Yeah.
and he was talking about that the reptilians weren't even hiding; they were still in plain sight in some regions in the remote parts of the world, like Africa. So, are these just different costumes that we've worn throughout time? But yeah, tell us more about that interview at the time. And I know a lot of people won't have
Well,
heard
well,
that.
I think to an extent, the energetic forms that these what are called astral entities, these other dimensional entities, take. I think they can project themselves in almost any form they like. So you have the stories of people seeing fairies, and then you have people seeing greys. You have, I mean, so what's real and what isn't? It's not easy to decide. You've got all the angels and demons of the ancient religious texts and stuff. I mean, who were they? They weren't angels, that's for sure. So, yeah, I first met Credo Mutwa when I was invited to speak in South Africa. I spoke in about 3 places in South Africa. Actually, Nelson Mandela's wife came to one of the talks. I remember. When was that? That was the 1990s, and I then came across Credo Mutwa because the man who was organizing the talks knew him and said, "You got to meet this guy." And he sat there and talked for about 3 or 4 hours because he's a great talker. Was Credo, and we hit it off big time. And I thought I've got to get this on camera for posterity because he was already quite old then. And I did that and talked to him for about 6 hours. And then went a number of times back to South Africa, spent a lot of time with him. And what I found fascinating was he was recounting ancient Zulu stories of reptilian entities from ancient times and how they were manipulating human society. And I, by that time, concluded that that was happening because of other sources in America and Britain and many other places. So we really hit it off. I remember him saying to me once, if you want to understand the Illuminati, Mr. David, he called me, study the reptile. And funnily enough, I came to Australia quite a few times before they banned me, and I went to some crocodile farms, etc., to study the reptile, and he was talking about how computer-like they were, basically. And I watched these demonstrations, and I thought it's very, very computer-like, very predictable in their behavior. I remember a guy was standing in the pen with these crocodiles, massive bloody thing, one of them, and he said, "Look, it's early because it was the sun had not long up." He said it's early, so they're going to be tired, they're not going to be ready yet. He said, "But when I go to the back and I whittle my stick in the water, they're not going to be able to resist coming to explore it." And that's exactly what they did. And then he's saying, if I do this with my stick, it's going to stop. And it was coming towards him, the bloke. Yeah, it's a bit of bottle, to say the least. And he put his stick down in a certain area of the head, and the thing just stopped, like instantly. And I saw the computer-like nature. And I have very much considered over the years, how many of these so-called non-human species are actually forms of AI. are actually programs themselves, rather than, if you like, just flesh and blood entities. And like I say, I think there are many different ways to explain the same thing, not just one. And I think if you're looking for one, you're gonna miss some of the others. So I do think I have come across, I don't know whether you have, mate, but I've come across a number of military people who've interacted with reptilians, and particularly greys in underground bases, who've said we used to call them the drones because they were like a program. They weren't like natural, if you like. But
Yeah, no,
anyway,
I've had a lot of people talk about the biological nature and the hybrid
yeah,
nature of the greys,
yeah.
but that I've had one survivor in particular that wouldn't say this on air, but he told me afterwards that at the deepest levels of the military base, there was one big hooded reptilian that you weren't allowed to look in the eye, that everyone was afraid of, that would kind of give the orders. So make of that what you will.
Well, that is funny because that has been told to me as well. It was told to me on one occasion in relation to the China Lake Naval Weapons Station in the Mojave Desert in California, that they had seen this entity who was just as you described there. Um, and that seemed to be the big boss, as it was explained to me. So that's one of the kind of interesting confirming things is the number of times you meet people in different parts of the world who and a lot of this was before I'd gone public with it, um, who tell you the same story of their experience in different countries even.
Hmm.
So yeah, it seems to me that if you go deep enough in these underground bases, you reach a level where it opens out into vast underground non-human quote cities.
Have you
Um,
ever? I was just doing some shower thoughts the other day about. Do you think that these underground chambers that are lined with bones and skulls, and do you think these were places of like regular sacrifice to these beings down into the underground caverns and stuff, or do you think there's any connection
yeah,
there?
yeah. Well, not just that type, but also the astral entities that operate from another dimension. Because when it comes to dimensions, when people talk about heaven, they tend to look up, don't they? Am I going to heaven? But it's not like that. Of course, it's that these dimensions of reality, they're like bands of frequency, and they share the same space, just like radio stations that share the same space. But unless you're on the dial for that particular radio station, you don't you don't get it. You don't see it. It doesn't interfere with anything. You're not aware of it because your dial is on a particular station. That's what you're hearing. And this biological computer locks us in, decodes this dimension of reality, tiny, tiny dimension of reality, certainly visible light, tiny. And therefore, that's what we see, that's what we experience. But in the same space, all this other stuff is going on. This is what things like ghosts and paranormal activity are about as well, in terms of things happening in the unseen, or you see the ghost and then it just disappears. This is all other dimensional stuff. And so the astral dimension, which is where I'm saying this force, this non-human force, is orchestrating this whole reality matrix from. It's actually at the lower levels, it's very, very close to this one. And, there can be interaction between the two. So many, many people who've taken part in these rituals have told me over the years how they have seen entities enter the ritual
Yes.
and manifest in the ritual. It's because a lot of these rituals, they take part or take place on vortex points, major vortex points on the world's energy grid. And these vortexes, they kind of tend to spin dimensions together. So it's easier to manifest in this dimension from another on those particular vortex points. And funnily enough, a lot of churches were put on the old vortex points, and a lot of the cathedrals were put on vortex points by people like the Knights Templar, and so a lot of rituals go on in churches. A lot of satanic rituals go on in churches for that reason. Anyway, the thing that really put a lot of things together for me was when I realized that these entities, these astral entities anyway, are feeding off human energy in the way that the Morpheus character in the Matrix held up the battery and said that the Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to turn humans into this, a battery. Every time we think and every time we feel emotion, we are generating often tremendous amounts of energy in the form of frequency. This is well known by mainstream science. And so there's a particular frequency that these entities feed off, these astral entities feed off, and that's relating to the states of fear, anxiety, depression, resentment, hatred, conflict, war, obviously. And these generate this low vibrational frequency energy, which they feed off. So first of all, they have an interest through this global cult in manipulating global events to generate human low vibrational emotional responses, because then we're producing the energy that they feed off. And I remember,
I do want to get into this a little bit more, David, about this matrix and the negative energy. But just before you do, have you read about the first ever DMT experiments? I think it was Rick Strassman that did, when he was putting people. DMT is the active substance in the ayahuasca, and he was putting people under these IV extended state infusions to explore the DMT astral world. And one of the first subjects regularly reported being attacked by these reptilian beings, and he had no knowledge of any of this. So that was a super interesting point that I don't know if you've heard that before.
Well, funnily enough, that would sync with the work of Robert Monroe, who founded the Monroe Institute. For people who haven't come across him, he wrote a lot of books about this stuff. Robert Monroe found spontaneously, it frightened him to death to start with, that he could project his consciousness into this astral dimension. People call it astral traveling. A lot of people can do this, more than people imagine, because a lot of people keep it quiet, of course. So he became very skilled at it, and so skilled that it got the interest of a US military psychological warfare study called Gateway, which was named after the technique that Monroe perfected. And they got people together who could project their consciousness into the astral dimension. And they just did this study on what they found and what they experienced. And I think the CIA declassified it in about 2003 or something. So we were able then to see some, or at least a report on what they found. First of all, they concluded that reincarnation was valid, which I strongly believe it is, and that one of the things, or one of the common themes that these various people in the study experienced were reptilian entities in this astral dimension. And so much so that in the Gateway study, they gave them the name of the alligators. So there was a lot came out of that Gateway study that confirmed the kind of stuff that I'm talking about in terms of this control system coming out of the astral dimension. And so he also found, he said, Monroe, that these entities were feeding off human low vibrational energy, and he gave it a name, Loosh.
Yes.
I mean, they can feed off the higher vibrational energy, but the low vibrational energy is, it seems, what they're really after. And so they want the world to be what it is because it generates a mass human reaction of low vibrational energetic response in terms of emotions and thought, etc. And so in the early 1990s, when I was putting together this global cult and how it worked, I started to see that many of the people that were prominent in this cult, at least on the level that you could see in the public arena, were also involved in Satanism and pedophilia, which are connected. And so obviously the question was, why? What's this about? Why are these people, many of them well-known, famous, doing satanic rituals, sacrifice rituals, to these entities which they perceived existed? Then you look back and you see the ancients were doing human sacrifice rituals to what they perceived to be the gods. Many of them were children, as in, sacrificing young virgins to the gods, kids, because there's a particular energy pre-puberty which these entities want more than anything, sick as it may seem and sick as it is. And so they were doing this as a gift to the gods. And of course, the question then is, what's the gift? What's the gift the gods get from human sacrifice? And then I started talking to people that have taken part in satanic ritual, or at least observed them, many against their will, and others that had seen the bloody light at last. And they were telling me that these entities, when there's a human sacrifice, it's done in a way that builds up maximum terror in the victim. Understandably, terror is a very powerful low vibrational energy. And so the idea is that you terrorize the victim, so they start generating this energy of terror, and in overseeing from this astral dimension, which, as I say, the lower levels are very close to this one, are these entities, or some groups of these entities, overseeing the ritual from the astral, and they are feeding off that energy that's coming off the victim.
I've heard people describe this as like sharks can sniff blood in the water, like the screams and that sound and that energy can all pierce into these other dimensions. And again, this was such a light bulb moment for me when I looked up the pharmacology of oxidized adrenaline and actually saw that there was a science to all this as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's adrenochrome, isn't it? The adrenaline that goes into the body, or goes into the blood in states of extreme terror. That's what it's been described to me, how these Satanists drink that in the human realm of the ritual. They drink that and it gives them a high, like a drug. If I look at someone and they're in an emotional state, then I can see they're in an emotional state. What I can't see are the vibes they're giving off as a result of that emotional state, because that's an astral energy. And so if you're in the astral overseeing a ritual, you are receiving that energy. And that's one of the or a key reason why these rituals are going on all over the world all the time. It's why pedophilia goes on such a massive scale. It's because you've got the pedophile abusing the child, and then the pedophile is overridden, if you like, or overseen by one of these astral entities, and they're feeding off the child's energy. You see, the child's energy pre-puberty is, I mean, we go through what we call puberty, and we see it as a hormonal chemical change, and on one level it is, but it's triggered by an energetic change in the energetic cycle of the human, of the kid, the child. And so it's a chemical change on one level, but it's a frequency change that triggers it. And they want that energy before that change takes place. But they want it in a low vibrational state. You know, they don't want a joyous child. It's the last thing they bloody want, because it's much more difficult for them to feed off that energy if they can at all. What they want, if you take the two together, you've got a child pre-puberty in that energetic state, and you're abusing it. So what emotional state is that child going to be in as a result of what you're doing?
Yeah.
And so the energy of the child goes into this lower frequency state, understandably, and now you can feed off it. And this is why Satanism and pedophilia are so connected. They're all part of the same thing. And this global cult that I talk about, the cement that holds it together is pedophilia and Satanism. At the inner core, and often far from the hidden core, the central core, indeed. And so it explains why when you look at these prominent members of the cult, invariably things like pedophilia come up. And talking of the royal family, we had this guy in Britain called Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
who was both a pedophile, mega historic levels of pedophilia, and a Satanist. And this is what has not come out, but it's all in my book, a book I wrote in great detail called The Perception Deception. He was also a procurer of children for the rich and famous.
Yes.
Politicians and the royals. And so by his own admission, Jimmy Savile, who was just a BBC disc jockey, as they called them in those days, and you would think, well, why would the royals be interested in him? He, by his own admission, was brought into the inner circle of the British royal family by a guy called Lord Mountbatten, who was a known paedophile. I mean, the FBI have a file on him and his paedophilia. And so he was brought in, Savile, in the 1960s, who was a procurer of children for the rich and famous, procured children for people like Ted Heath, the former British Prime Minister, as well. Yeah. And he remained a bosom buddy of the royals, of Mountbatten and Prince Philip until they fell out, and to the end of his life, Prince Charles, now King Charles. And he was a mega pedophile who procured children for the rich and famous. Yeah. And a year after he died in 2011. A year after he died, there was a TV program came out exposing him.
Yes.
And the lady I met, who was a close friend of Princess Diana, also told me about Jimmy Savile and how Jimmy Savile was used as a go-between between Prince Charles then and Diana when their marriage was breaking down. And Diana thought he was a sleazeball and couldn't stand him. But he was there because of what he did. And the police never collared him because of what he did and who he was connected to. And so you then had, when the program came out, you had the odd question, staggeringly few, mind. Well, what did the royals know about this guy who's in the connected to them all these years back into the 60s? And they're going, oh no, we didn't know. Excuse me, the police bloody knew, right? That well came out. The police knew and did nothing about it. And you didn't know? You mean the police that protect the royal family weren't telling you about this guy who was in your bosom center? Ludicrous. And so I look at what's happened to Prince Andrew, quite bloody rightly, as a result of his connections to Epstein. But then I say, well, hold on, King Charles, you've sent him off into purgatory in bloody Norfolk. Now there's a big police investigation into him because you're trying to kind of put him at arm's length. But your one of your best mates was Jimmy Savile. What's going on? And it's a joke that the British royals haven't been sat down and cross-examined over their connections to Jimmy Savile, because that is one of the great scandals that's never been followed up by the authorities for blatantly obvious reasons.
Well, just as much of a scandal as why the Epstein files connections, and in Australia, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the Wood Royal Commission and the 28 high profiles that nearly came to a head, and we've been covering that a lot as well. But last thing I want to talk about, David, is we mentioned the most extremes versions of like the loosh and the energy harvesting, but I've had a lot of guests joining some dots around Satanism light, as you like to call it, and this depravity of our culture and manufacturing of our culture, and just like normalizing things like gambling, porn, OnlyFans, drugs, all these things, and people not realizing that they are part of that at the lower level. Satanism, light, greed, all these negative energies. And you also mentioned some positive energies like sports stadiums that still are harvesting adrenaline. And so this kind of society, I think this is how we ultimately win the war, is raising our consciousness, getting out of these lower chakras or whatever people want to call them, and becoming more than just these low-level addictions and going along with the programming. And what are your thoughts on all that and like these parasites that are feeding off us?
Well, it's a simple thing, really. If you're feeding off low vibrational human energy, you want humans producing low vibrational human energy. So that's what you will do. You will orchestrate society with wars, with conflict. Family conflict out to world war conflict, and you will get them to focus on low vibrational things. That's the way you do it. And there are many different forms that is done. I mean, a simple thing, you mentioned football. I mean, I've been to one or two football games over the years. I don't watch football like I used to a long time ago, but I used to play it. But I've seen even among smaller teams where you think everyone would get on. It's just a game, lads. It's just a game. But the abuse that is delivered both ways in a game among groups of supporters, not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them, is all loosh, it's a thing. You see, if you look at where we're heading to this human AI fusion, so AI becomes the human mind and we cease to think our own thoughts anymore. I mean, lots of times we don't anyway for various reasons, but I mean at all. And what we need to, what needs to happen for that to prevail is for us to be constantly at war with each other and facing competition from each other, trying to get to the top of the greasy pole. And funny enough, I was sitting yesterday, and I was just looking at this very, very old building, and I was thinking, thinking about the people that built it a long time ago, all the people that would have lived there and worked there, and you think of how they were probably, battling in competition with each other, or they were falling out, and little things causing conflict and all this stuff. But they've all long gone. And if they got to the end of their lives and just sat down and thought, what really matters? I have this thing I've been saying for years about the deathbed perception. You're on your deathbed and you're told you've got 10 minutes to live, mate. Look back at your life, what mattered? And the only things that mattered would have been, unless they're still completely bloody crazy, the only thing that matters is basically how much they loved, how much they were loved. What matters is how they got on with their family, how they got on with their friends, and all this stuff. All the things through their life that caused them grief and generated emotional loosh, none of it matters when you've got 10 minutes left to live. Like the bloke that cut you up at the lights in 1959 or something. Does that matter now? I know it don't matter. Well, why would it matter? Of course it doesn't matter. And things that were said about you, things that were done about you, what does that matter now to you? 10 minutes to live? It don't matter at all, mate. And what I would say then to the guy is, well, I was kidding you. You haven't got 10 minutes to live. But take that perspective you've just had and take that on for the rest of your life. And you'll find that life is very different to what it has been, because there's so many things that get us angry. Like, okay, a football match. Okay, so your team doesn't win. All right, well, you'd like your team to win. I can understand that. But it didn't win. Nobody's died. No one's suffered. No one's been beaten up. It just the team put a ball in the net more times than yours. Doesn't matter. And yet we think it does. It's important. And so many things that are important from the deathbed perspective, they're not important at all. Yeah. But they generate this emotional upheaval, these emotional reactions, when none of it matters. It just is what it is. And then you get on with the rest of your life.
And this gets into intention as well, right? Because you or I can still go to a sports game and enjoy it without getting all emotional and wanting to fight and kill the other crowd on the team. Maybe we can still have a beer together and get into a deep conversation versus an alcoholic that's struggling. These are all intention and these knowledge and power things to get into, right?
But it's also, it is that, but it's also a perspective. It's putting life into perspective. So, you're fighting, you're cussing, you think this is important, that's important, and while you're doing all this, the AI human fusion agenda goes on and on and on and on to its conclusion. And the idea is to keep us basically trapped in the drama. This is a massive part of human manipulation. They want your attention. They don't want your attention on that. Oh no, they want your attention so that they can put it over here on things that overwhelmingly don't matter if we really look at it in their true perspective.
Yes.
But they want you looking over here because they don't want you looking over there. And so you are given dramas, endless dramas. Oh my God, you'll never guess what's happened now. What? So and so, so and so, so and so. Well, what's that matter? It probably be over by tomorrow.
Yeah.
What's the problem? Oh my God! All right. And what is Trump? He is a drama queen on a stick. Every day you look at the news and it's like, what's Trump done now? Right? And it's all this moving your attention, your drama. And in many ways, what's going on in the world, Iran, all of it is getting your attention over here while this incessantly goes on towards AI human fusion. Yeah. And if you can just stop, take a breath, and start to look at what's important rather than what grabs your attention. And sometimes what's important won't grab your attention as much as something that doesn't matter. Then we can maybe stop fighting each other and focus on that which affects all of us, which is our right to free thought being dismantled by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And all the other consequences for human life of artificial intelligence, total control by artificial intelligence. I mean, why would they want our concentration or our attention over there while that's going on there? For the same reason that a magician wants you looking here when he's doing the trick with his hand, right?
Well, I don't think
exactly the same principle.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that the quality of like TV and movie and stuff has gone downhill as the politics has kind of become the drama that everyone's being consumed with now. But the final question or advice I want you to give people at home is what's a lot of people describe this loneliness of waking up, and no one probably went through it more than you, have been ridiculed and whatnot, but you kept speaking your truth and stayed authentic. And I think that's probably the ultimate currency in all of this is authenticity. But what's your advice for people at home that might be waking up and, oh, no one else in my family's awake, or no one else in my workplace? I really feel like we need to help people connect and build communities that can speak truth. And there's more people waking up than ever. I'm sure you noticed that too. And does that give you hope? So, yeah.
Yeah, it does. Because when I started out in 1990, consciously on this quote journey, there almost no one was at all bloody interested. So yeah, it was lonely in that sense. But the thing is that if what you're saying has validity, then at some point it will be shown to be so. But if you don't say it at the time, when it's shown to be so, and you say, I knew this was happening, they go, oh, yeah, of course you did. Why didn't you say anything? Well, I didn't say anything because I thought you'd be let off at me and all that stuff. So with the gift of knowledge in all these areas comes responsibility. And if you are talking about something that's outside of other people's sense of normal, then don't expect a round of applause and a statue, because you're going to get pushback. But I think one of the things I've shown is that you can have mega levels of pushback, and then eventually people go, well, actually, maybe there was something in what this guy was saying. But you've got to say it first. And you've got to realize, although you're right, it's so much easier now because more people are open to things that they never were when I started out. you are going to face pushback. You are going to face dismissal, but it's part of the game. It's just the way things are. And if you just keep at it, and my approach is never to seek to convince people of anything. I'm fortunate because my family has grown up with this. My boys have grown up with this, and they've seen it for the validity that it's turned out to have. But I know, I mean, during COVID, how many families were kind of destroyed by people being on one view of COVID and others buying the official version. I mean, so many upheavals in families as a result. And again, something I said earlier, we don't have to agree on anything. And we don't have to agree on everything, because we have a right to our opinion. We have a right to our view. We might think, well, you have your view because of what you've just downloaded from the state, but it's still their view and they have a right to have it. The problem comes when you seek to impose your view on other people. My approach has been, here's some information. If you don't want to hear it, or don't listen, and here's some information, make of it what you will. Because I'm not trying to convince you of anything, because I'm just someone else with a story to sell. Otherwise, just here's some information, make of it what you will. And if that had happened during COVID, oh, well, you've got your view on COVID, I've got mine. Okay, that's fine. There wouldn't have been this great family upheaval that so many people went through. I mean, the number of people I've met over the years since who've talked about how their families were just devastated by different opinions on COVID, and how they were basically, as they say in Britain, sent to Coventry and ignored as a result of being challenging the official story. So you come to your conclusions, you say what you think, people accept it or don't accept it, and you get on with your life. If people reach the point where, no, I'm never going to believe anything you say about this, well, fair enough. Then what's the point? Yeah. Just talk to people who might be more open, and let the others do what they do until maybe they might wake up to the fact the world's not like they thought it was. But don't get het up on trying to convince people, because all that does is devastate you emotionally, makes you frustrated. It makes you sad that I mean, a number of people who have reached a point where they say, look, mum, dad, don't have that bloody jab. It's not what they're telling you it is. And they've had it, and they've taken the consequences, and you're sad, and understandably so. But you can't do any more than tell them what you know, and they make up their own minds. And we have to be at peace with that. Otherwise, we're just someone else with a story to sell. And, those days have got to be over. Here's some information. You decide what you think of it. And you let me believe something different in the same way, and we'll get on. We'll be fine. 100%. But you try to impose what you believe on me, and it won't be fine. And that's the big problem. That's where divide and rule comes in.
Well, mate, thanks so much for your time today. I'll put the links to follow all David's socials down below, his website, all his books, and I appreciate you being generous with your time. Any final thoughts, mate?
No problem, mate. Been nice talking to you.
Cool. Take care, guys. Cheers.
See you, mate. Bye.